Hello and welcome to this edition of Weir Wednesdays, when we take a closer look at work in the Samuel E. Weir collection at RiverBrink. My name is Deborah Antonczyk, and I'm the Director-Curator at RiverBrink. Today we're looking at this drawing, which is untitled, A Child's Head, from 1902, a pencil on paper by Canadian-born artist Horatio Walker. We can see the closely drawn lines which define the contours of the face, which is half in shadow. The distinctive cap suggests the subject is a young girl, her hair hidden perhaps for modesty and for domestic chores. Horatio Walker was born in Listowel, Ontario in 1858. In this self-portrait from 1900, also in the Weir collection, we see the artist with palette and brush casually, coolly returning the viewer's gaze. Walker showed an early interest in drawing and in 1870 visited Quebec with his parents. It was a very different experience than his life in rural Ontario, and the city and its environs made a lasting impression. Walker had no formal training as an artist, which is not unusual for the period in Canada, but at the age of 15, he apprenticed at Notman and Fraser Photography Studio in Toronto. And here I'm showing a photograph from the McCord collection of the facade of the studio on King Street. There, Walker met artist John Fraser and Lucius O'Brien and worked alongside another apprentice, Homer Watson. Artists were employed at the studio to paint backdrops for photographs, to assist with composition, and to color photographs. Here, Walker also learned watercolor techniques from Robert Gagan. In 1876, Walker traveled to the United States to attend the Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia. Notman and Fraser won the commission to supply souvenir photographs at the exposition, and Walker may have assisted in the work. Here I'm showing a stereoscopic view of the Horticultural Hall. And afterwards, Walker remained in the United States, living and working in New York, then Syracuse, and later Rochester. Walker continued to develop as an artist, working first in watercolor. And here I'm showing an example of watercolor titled Watching the Turkeys in the collection of the Smithsonian. Just so you have an idea of his facility in watercolor. He then went on to work more typically in oil painting. Perhaps influenced by the popularity of the Barbizon School of Painting in the United States, Walker made the subject his own. A 6-month walking tour of Quebec in the summer of 1880 provided ample material, as he apparently stayed with habitant families and studied and sketched rural life, their homes, their animals, the people. And here I'm showing you his The Harrower from 1890 in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum in New York to give you a sense of the rural life that he captured at this time. The Barbizon School of Painting is named for the village of Barbizon on the edge of the forest of Fontainebleau, just outside of Paris. The school was known for naturalistic depictions of landscapes, part of a mid-19th century movement towards realism. Artists associated with the Barbizon School were interested in capturing the essence of a quiet rural life in opposition to a growing industrialization. And here I'm showing Camille Corot's scene in the forest of Fontainebleau from 1846. And Corot, one of the most popular Barbizon painters, certainly very popular amongst collectors at this time in the United States. Along with depictions of landscape, Barbizon painters often included figures in the landscape and created genre scenes, that is, scenes of everyday life. And here we're looking at The Gleaners by Jean-François Millet from 1857 in the collection of the Musée d'Orsay. The poorest peasants have been given permission to gather the harvest, to gather the remains of the harvest, that is, whatever was left on the ground after the harvest. There is a quiet dignity in the figures with biblical overtones, but audiences also saw a political critique in the aftermath of the 1848 uprisings and the attention to the rural poor. Even more explicit is Millet's Man with a Hoe from 1862 in the Getty Museum collection. Here, the harsh reality of farming, the backbreaking labor, and the effect on the body is quite clear. Walker traveled to Europe as early as 1882, but there were many examples of the Barbizon School and Barbizon painters in the United States, along with a school of American Barbizon painters. There are some similarities between Walker's The Harrower and Man with a Hoe, but on the whole, Walker's work is more sentimental and steers clear of any political message. The more typical scenes of rural Quebec are noticeably different. They lack the critical content, the focus on rural poverty. Instead, the artist celebrates the quiet, unchanging life of rural Quebec, often with strong religious overtones, as in this painting titled Ave Maria from 1906 in the collection of the Art Gallery of Hamilton. Into the 20th century, Walker shows a vision of habitant life frozen in time. The New York-based artist presents a view of Quebec that paralleled views of French peasants from 40 years earlier. Living in New York and traveling to Europe, Walker spent his summers in Saint-Pétronille on the southwestern tip of the Ile d'Orléans, opposite Quebec. In the 19th century, the island was very popular with the Anglo-British community of Quebec, and it remains a popular tourist resort community. Here I'm showing a photograph of the artist painting en plein air circa 1935 in his garden. If Walker concerned himself with the French Catholic habitant community, it was out of recognition that the way of life was disappearing. Walker achieved extraordinary success in the United States, winning prizes and securing commissions into the 20th century. His work is found in many of the major collections of the United States, but Walker was not well known in Canada until after the First World War, when Canadian collectors and museums began to acquire paintings by the artist. Here I'm showing a black and white reproduction of Pétronille from the National Gallery of Canada collection in what is the finished portrait based on our little sketch, the little sketch we have at RiverBrink. For one thing, Walker's work was expensive, a fact that Sam Weir remarked on in his correspondence with Walker's niece and heir, Olive Pretty, in 1939. The artist's popularity had declined, and Weir cautioned that the paintings were priced too high following the artist's death in 1938. Nonetheless, Weir acquired the sketch in 1943 and went on to purchase 5 additional paintings in the 1950s and 60s. In his correspondence, Weir often mentions the chronological history of Canadian art he is developing for the museum in Queenston. In one sense, this chronology gives structure to what might appear to be a haphazard collection of paintings. And the chronology, as it was developed by Canadian art historians of the period, helped to advance an idea of progress. It can appear at times to function, however, as a checklist with less attention to quality or the best work that an artist produced. But then Weir also acquired little gems such as the sketch, the untitled sketch, A Child's Head, which we appreciate very much having in the collection at RiverBrink. Thank you, and I hope you've enjoyed watching, and hopefully you will look for our next Weir Wednesday. Thank you.